The wind howled through the desolate valley, slapping against the wooden walls of a lonely cabin sitting on the edge of nowhere. Snow swirled in thick white sheets, erasing the world beyond a few paces from the front porch. Inside, a young woman named Clara Mae Dawson, no older than 22, huddled close to the flickering lantern, her thin hands busy stitching a tear in her worn dress. Her little fire crackled weakly, barely pushing back the chill that crept in through the gaps in the cabin walls. She'd been living alone since her parents passed, too. Winters gone, and every day since had been a fight against hunger, loneliness, and the unending ache of survival. Her life had become quiet, predictable in its sorrow, until that night. A distant sound, faint through the storm, made her lift her head. It was a horse. At first she thought she imagined it, but then came the muffled thud of hooves, and a man's desperate shout cutting through the wind. Clara's heart raced. Strangers never came this far, certainly not in a blizzard. Gripping her father's old rifle, she stood and crept toward the door, the floorboards creaking beneath her bare feet. Another cry, this time closer. Then 3 loud knocks. "Ma'am," a voice called out, deep and rough from the cold. "Please, my boy's hurt. We need shelter." For a moment she froze. Bandits were not rare on the mountain roads, but there was something in the man's voice. Hoarse, trembling, real, that made her open the latch. The door flew inward under the weight of the wind, snow swirling in like a ghost. A tall man stood there, face half hidden under a hat crusted with frost, his coat torn and dusted white. In his arms he carried a small boy, limp and pale, wrapped in a blue blanket. Behind him a horse snorted and stomped, steam rising from its nostrils. "Please," the man said again, his lips trembling. "He's burning up. We got caught in the storm." Clara stepped aside, her instinct stronger than her fear. "Come in, quick." The cowboy entered, his boots leaving heavy prints on the wooden floor. She shut the door behind him, barring out the storm's roar. "Lay him by the fire," she said, moving fast, pulling blankets off her cot. The man obeyed, kneeling beside his son, unwrapping the child's face. The boy couldn't have been more than 6. His cheeks flushed red from fever, lips trembling. Clara touched his forehead. It was scorching hot. "He needs warmth and water," she murmured, rushing to pour some from her kettle. The man watched, his jaw tight with worry. "Thank you, ma'am," he said, voice low. "Name's Jack Callahan. We were riding from Red Creek when the snow hit harder than expected. Horse almost gave out. I thought we'd both freeze out there." Clara nodded, wringing out a cloth to cool the boy's skin. "You did right bringing him here." "What's his name?" "Eli," Jack said softly. "He's all I got." Hours passed as the storm raged outside. Jack tended to his horse while Clara nursed the boy. Between the crackle of fire and the whistle of wind, there was silence, heavy yet somehow comforting. Clara glanced at Jack as he sat by the hearth, his broad shoulders slumped, eyes fixed on his son. His face, though rugged with stubble and dirt, carried the quiet dignity of a man who had seen too much. Something about him stirred her heart, not in romance. Not yet, but in sympathy, maybe kinship. He looked like someone who carried his pain quietly, the same way she did. When Eli finally stirred and coughed, Jack rushed over, a rare smile breaking through the grim lines of his face. "You're okay, son," he whispered, relief softening his tone. Clara smiled too, feeling warmth spread through the cold cabin, not just from the fire, but from something human and real. When the storm eased, the world outside turned into a white ocean of silence. Jack offered to leave the next morning, but Clara insisted they stay until the boy was stronger. "The storm's not done with us yet," she said, "and he's still weak. You both can stay another night." Jack hesitated. He was a proud man, used to paying his own way, but there was no arguing with the truth. "I appreciate that, Miss Clara," he said, tipping his hat. "Don't got much to offer, but gratitude. That'll do just fine," she replied, smiling faintly. The next day, Clara cooked a simple stew, beans, potatoes, and what little dried meat she had left. As they ate, Eli laughed softly at her clumsy attempts to braid his hair. And for the first time in months, Clara's cabin felt alive again. Jack watched her with quiet eyes, noting the strength behind her gentle manner, the resilience in the way she made a home out of so little. He noticed her patched dress, her rough hands, the way she always gave the warmest piece of bread to his son. Something in him softened. That night, after Eli fell asleep by the fire, Jack stepped outside to check the horse. The stars had returned, glittering cold and clear above the snow. When he came back in, Clara was sitting by the fire sewing again. "You're not from around here, are you?" she asked. Jack shook his head. "No, ma'am. Been traveling for months, just trying to figure where home is anymore." She looked at him curiously, but he said no more. He had secrets, she could feel it, and though she wanted to ask, she didn't. Instead, she poured him some coffee and they sat quietly, listening to the fire pop and crackle. As dawn crept through the window, the storm had died completely. Jack saddled his horse, wrapped Eli in the warmest blanket Clara owned, and thanked her again. "You saved us," he said simply. "Can't ever repay that," she smiled softly. "Just promise to get that boy someplace safe." He nodded, tipping his hat again before riding into the pale morning light. Clara watched them disappear down the snowy trail, her heart heavy yet strangely full. She didn't know that by offering kindness to a stranger, she had changed her life forever. Because Jack Callahan wasn't just a cowboy. Lost in a storm, he was one of the wealthiest ranch owners in the Western Territories, traveling incognito after losing his wife and fortune to betrayal. And something about that lonely cabin, that brave young woman with the patched dress, had reminded him what real goodness looked like. 2 days later, Clara heard another knock at her door. When she opened it, a man in a fine black coat stood there holding a sealed letter. "Miss Dawson?" he asked. "This is from Mr. Callahan." Inside the envelope was a note written in strong, deliberate handwriting. "You gave me warmth when I had nothing left. I intend to return the favor. Prepare for company." And beneath it, folded carefully, was a deed. The deed to the land her cabin stood on, and a letter of transfer from the Red Creek Bank, declaring her the legal owner of 50 acres of fertile valley. Clara's hands trembled as she read. For the first time in her life, tears fell not from sorrow, but from pure disbelief. Outside, the snow began to melt, and in the distance she swore she saw a horseman pausing on a ridge, tipping his hat toward her cabin before disappearing into the golden sunrise. And that's how one small act of kindness on a cold winter night changed everything. "Oh,